Hi, and welcome to Bible Secrets, a contemporary podcast series about the origins, translations, and interpretations of the Bible and Holy Scriptures.
We hope you enjoyed this piece of art in the form of discussion, which was derived from hours of independent study and a burning passion for seeking truth and wisdom.
We speak freely on this podcast, so there may be language that's not entirely suited or agreed with everybody, but it's meant to be fun while it's also educational.
Please like and subscribe, share, and help us reach more people and inspire conversations that can both be hard but necessary. This is Bible Secrets.
Hell yeah! Let's go.
I wanna know what the meaning of life is. I wanna know the cost of your faith.
Start. Welcome. Oh, shit, I'm not on the right one. Welcome, everybody, to a very, very special project known as Bible Secrets. I'm your co-host, Cougar and Chan.
And I am your other co-host, Chandler Fehr.
And welcome to, this is Bible Secrets, where we are going to do 10 to 12 to 14 episode series that is its own separate entity that is just going to be talking about shit that we're learning, and we're trying to understand what's going on. And one of the most prevalent things, I think that anyone could agree, that one of the most prevalent things that you have to contend with if you live in the United States is the Bible, and people that believe in the Bible and people that don't. And you will run into that. It would be very hard for you to live in the United States and not run into anybody with a strong opinion one way or the other. So it's good to just kind of know what's going on with it and seeing if there's anything to it or how crazy it actually is.
Yeah, and you could almost say that this is Bible Secrets presented by Fehr the Burn, presented from Fehr the Burn. Cougar and I started this podcast April of 2021, and this is going to be coming out fall of 2022. So, it's a really exciting time, and I think personally that Fehr the Burn was started to do this project. This project is a reason that Fehr the Burn got started, because I really feel like God has been working in both Cougar and I's life since the beginning of Fehr the Burn, and that's not something I thought I would ever say.
Yeah.
Especially, no offense, but about you.
Yeah, 100%.
Because even when I told my sister that I was like, yeah, I'm doing this Bible podcast with Cougar, and we're going to go into Bible Secrets, and shocker, next episode we're going to be doing a thing about the biblical universe and or flat Earth. And she was like, Cougar believes this? And I was like, I don't really know. He's kind of talking about it a lot. And she was like, that's so crazy. I would have never, ever thought that he would have ended up being religious.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a religious individual now?
The definition of religious. I don't go to church. I don't necessarily want to go to church. I probably will at some point in my life, because I think it's good to meet people.
Yeah. And have community.
But as of right now, to go learn, I really don't feel like I can listen to a church on YouTube in an hour and then listen to another one and listen to, can, the information out there is crazy. So religious in the sense that, and this is what I was going to lead in with you, is I do have some belief in God, or a belief in God, and something, I think that there's something higher than humans or bigger than humans, or that created us.
Have you thought that for a while? When was the first time that you can remember? Because, you grew up an atheist, for people who don't know.
Yes.
You can go back to episode 2 of Fehr the Burn. We talk about our social construction. Cougar grew up an atheist, so, when did you start to believe?
Once, and I actually just saw a quote from Aaron Rodgers, who was talking about, he did ayahuasca and had this quote of him talking about that. I don't know if it was real. I saw it on Facebook, but that just leads into, I had a couple psychedelic experiences that gave me just the notion that I went from thinking that I was just a biological creature to I had an experience outside of my body, and that's the only way I can describe it, that someone could have any, you can go further into details, but it just kind of loses. It was crazy. And so that was kind of the catalyst of just me being wow, maybe I need to slow down a little bit and really think about what the fuck I've just been living. I've just been going. I've just been blinders on and just going through life, and I haven't thought about anything at all. And so that kind of just compelled me to do that. And I've just been the past, 3-4 years, I've just been, or 3 years, just trying to study and trying to learn and trying to apply things that I've learned and see how they work and stuff like that. And so religious, no. In terms of what most people would think when they hear religious, I would say no.
From like a vast definition.
Yeah.
Not necessarily
general.
your own,
right.
but from like a general definition.
And if someone pushed back and said, I do think you're religious, I think they can make an argument that I am. But
yeah.
You mentioned that you feel like God has been working in us, and I think that's a pretty amazing and crazy claim. What do you think about, like, why do you have that belief in God? Why do you think that's there?
I think it's hard to say, right? Like, I've always thought that religion is humans. I mean, obviously I grew up going to church and whatnot, but I always thought that after I left the church that religion was just kind of humans' best guesses at what's going on, right? And so everyone's going to kind of come up with this or with that, and there's going to be a little bit of tweaks here and there. Like even Islam talks about Jesus, but they just say that he's a prophet as opposed to the Son of God. Obviously Christians are going to say that he's the Son of God. And then you kind of have like Buddhism and Taoism. Like everyone is just trying to like reconcile with really not knowing the foundations of the world.
Well, and it's like you have all of these different cultures trying to describe the same thing. And so they're going to inherently say something different, right?
Yeah. I mean, yes and no, right? Like they're going to say something different, but there's also universal truths that you'll find in a lot of religions as well. Like a lot of people like to bring up the fact that the golden rule, like treat others how you want to be treated, is throughout all religions. And the Christian way of putting that is love your neighbor as yourself. Right. So like that is true, where it's like there's not really a religion out there that it seems like being a bad person is going to further you along. Even in Satanism, like Satanism, a lot of the laws of Satan that we went over, I mean, they have to do with good things, make sure that you have a consent sign before you mate with somebody, make sure you don't harm small children, like being a good person, not putting your burdens onto others. So that's something that I always noticed, was that generally, even people who were religious or weren't religious, belonged to some religion or not religion, being a good person was something that people wanted to strive to, typically, right?
Right.
And my question is, like, why would we want to do that? Like, is it just some human development that we have in our brains where we grew up being communal because we are weaker bodied, so therefore we need each other? Or is it something higher?
Right.
And we're 99% like apes, but what is that other 1%? That's the question that I always found myself with, was if we did evolve from this great ancestor and we're 99% like a chimpanzee or orangutans or bonobos or whatever it is that are these great apes, what is the thing that separates us? And I've always kind of thought that the thing that separates us was the fact that we have souls. And I don't want to claim that maybe they don't have souls, but I definitely feel like humans do.
Well, some would claim that it's intelligence that is the separator.
Yeah, like intelligence between like the fact that I'm so intelligent that I can recognize you as another human.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about that? Like that's kind of the counter to someone having a soul, is that, well, we just got smarter and now that we're better than other animals because we're smarter than other animals.
Yeah, I don't know about that, because it's hard to like identify what true intelligence is. I feel like I was thinking about this last night. Like, how do we know that dolphins aren't truly more intelligent than us? We know that they're really smart, but because they don't like build buildings and have these structures and make like smoother ways of doing things, like how do we know that their perception of the world isn't greater than ours? Because they come up and they look at you,
or more aware,
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I see that.
So I don't know if it's intelligence, because I feel like there's lots of things that are intelligent that are still very primal, and I feel like humans are primal to a sense, but we also have the thing in us that giving feels better than getting, truthfully, at the end of the day.
Yes.
And helping someone instead of hurting someone usually will feel better at the end of the day.
Right.
So there is like some sort of bond and connection that I felt like humans had over other species.
And you wouldn't just attribute that to just evolution?
No, I would. I attribute it to having a soul. And I think that people's souls are connected in a way, that we're all one spirit, to a sense. Obviously, we're many different spirits, but we belong to this bigger conglomerate of other spirits. So to me, I think that the reason that I kind of came back into my belief of God was that humans are just so vastly different than everything else in the animal kingdom. I feel as though we have to be set apart. Because we are that 1%, I feel like, is like, you could quote unquote like the God gene, right? And I don't know what it is, and I'm not claiming to be like some sort of scientist, but there is something that makes us different, even with religions, right? Like with being like, well, you're wrong because you're Islamic and I'm a Jew and therefore I'm right. Right? Like bears, from what we understand, don't have that argument. Like, even just coming from, like, where do we come from? They don't wonder where they come from. Our ability to wonder obviously could come from intelligence as well, right? Like, from a developed brain. But I just think that having all of the different ideas comes from souls and possibly, like, different countering points of view that are, you know, harmful to whatever, could come from a negative force trying to separate you from those collective souls, you know, or the goodness or the light or the collectiveness, the oneness.
That's kind of where I'm at with my experience, is that I felt like I became aware of my soul when I had that out-of-body experience. And then if you do research on people and their stories of out-of-body experiences, there's a lot of similarities in them, and that is, I was somewhere different than where my body was. And so before it was that I was my body, like this was me. But then when I said the statement that I experienced something that my body didn't, who is that I? What the fuck even is that? There's like, it was such a mind fuck, but that's where I started to become aware of the separation between just my biological self and the thing that makes me different than any other animal that we've ever seen, you know?
Right. Where do you feel like we get these texts from? Right. So if we come to the conclusion that, like, between you and me, like, okay, there is some sort of bigger thing out there, right? That's like allows you to see yourself outside of your body, that connects us. Where do we the next question then is, like, what does that God or those deities think? Right. So, like, that's where we, what is it? Derive that from the texts.
Yes. We would, the first thing that you would do, in my experience, is that you start to come up with things that you think it could be like, and then you realize that you don't know anything, and that you should refer to maybe somebody else has thought the same thing, and maybe they asked more people and they studied it, and you realize, oh shit, they've been doing this for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So you're almost instantaneously have to go take a look at any ancient text. You don't have to look at a specific one, but you're going to be compelled to do that because these are the people that have been thinking about this shit this whole time. And that was kind of the crazy thing for me too, is like doing all this studying that we've been doing, is just like, there's a lot of people out here researching this shit, and they have opinions, and they've done way more studying than I've done, and they're not even close to the people who were doing this for 12 hours a day, translating, and I can't even imagine. And
it's crazy to think that humans for the longest time have been wondering where we come from.
Yeah, exactly. And when I thought that it was some original thought, but what made it even more profound is that, oh, these motherfuckers, I'm late to the party in that aspect. So that means I need to take a look at what these people have come up with when they've asked that question, you know, and just as human beings, and then you can go from there. But that gets into, you know, the Buddhist principles, that gets into Islam. And I want to learn more about the Quran and shit. I think that's going to be my next thing, is like not diving in, but like just trying to give it a respectful understanding. I think that'd be cool.
It's a really fascinating book, bro. It's, I've been listening to the Quran since probably for like 2 months now. Just like occasionally there's a podcast that it just, you know, reads you all of the Quran.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And so like I'll just be like working or whatever, and I'll put it on. It's a really fascinating book. It's very different. So do you know where like the idea of Islam versus Jewish comes from?
No.
So Islam comes from the line of Esau, and Judaism comes from the line of Jacob, I want to say. And they had a dad, I forget what his name is, but it was like your sons get whatever's left over, right? Like their inheritance.
Right.
So Esau's the oldest, so he's supposed to get the majority of the inheritance. I think he gets like 2/3 of his dad. Man, the fact that I'm not remembering his name is so crazy to me. Whatever his dad has, 2/3 of it will go to Esau and 1/3 of it will go to Jacob. Well, his dad's really old and he's dying, and Jacob comes to him and he's like, "Hey, Dad, you like." I think he brings him something, and he's like, "You should like give me all of the farm." And his dad being old, I'm pretty sure his dad either gives him all of the farm or he gives him Esau's part of the farm. Right. And so from those literal brothers, you get the break into Islam and Judaism. And that's why they're like vastly always against each other. Like always have been against each other.
It's like two families who were against each other, and then they had a story and they told their side, and that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's
interesting.
It's also interesting because if you really look at the religions, I mean, I don't want to talk too much shit on Allah and Islam because Andrew Tate, the God Savior, the Jesus Christ of celebrity boxing,
He's back, baby.
That's going to come to end Jake Paul's career. He said that he believes that Islam is the last true religion in the world because it's the only God that you can't diss. Because like people will diss Muhammad and they'll die. Like you don't diss Muhammad, So I don't want to talk too much shit on Allah, but really when you look at Judaism and then you look at Islam, it's very close. It has to do a lot with how good can you be in the eyes of God? Like how much do you really love God that you're not going to be corrupted by your flesh and by your sin, and that you are going to worship and praise God every moment of every single day in order to gain his favor. Right. Obviously, in Judaism, you have the Israelites who are descendants from Jacob being the chosen people of God. So they kind of believe that inherently they're chosen. Kind of getting into predestination versus free will, which we'll also bring up in this podcast in later episodes. But yeah, it's just fascinating to me how both of those religions are very much based off of how good can you be? And then Jesus comes into the picture and kind of paints a new layer over it.
And kind of changes a lot of things. Yeah.
Really brings up a lot of like different arguments. And you good with that camera?
Fucking camera died.
No, dude, it died. It's all right. We'll figure it out. Welcome to Bible Secrets. This is so funny because this is the first podcast that Cougar and I have done in a while in this room.
Yeah, it has been a while. And it was also even when I was like at your place. It's been like 4 months.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to try to figure this out on the pod, or do you want to stop this? Or
we can just cut. Like we'll just cut.
Okay.
We'll cut this part out because I want to try. Maybe an easy fix here. And we were left off right at Jesus changing the narrative with.
Is that where we were?
Yes.
Nice.
Damn, bro, that fucking blows.
Are we back?
No.
Fuck. Do we can also use my phone if we need to at any point. I don't know if that's gonna help or not, but
It might actually. Yeah, it looks good as fuck.
big ass eyes. It's crazy when you don't
Beautiful
smoke how
eyes.
your eyes are so
Yeah,
big.
you can see it. Yeah, they actually have eyes. Because I think I fuck it up, and I think that I have to connect it to the computer, but I don't. So this one is a lot more. There's a lot more powerful charger, so we're good.
Lit.
Okay, and I'm gonna scooch this shit this way.
Is it still recording or?
Yes, it is. Yep. So once we're done, we can just jump right into the middle and we'll cut it. And so I said Jesus came in and kind of changed everything up. And so that's the thing, is that's kind of the discrepancy between Islam and Christianity is Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because one says he's a prophet, and so they hold him in high respect.
They
so
do.
A lot of people would say that you actually, in those same places you couldn't talk shit on Muhammad, they wouldn't allow you to talk shit on Jesus either. They would have a problem with that as well.
You think so?
Yeah, absolutely.
I disagree.
Okay.
Because from what I understand, Muhammad is the last prophet, and he's like the special one.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like I think Islamic people kind of talk shit about Jesus a lot. I mean, I can't really say that for certain.
I think he's a highly respected prophet in their book. Like I think because these Muslims have a TikTok where they talk to people on the street and stuff, and they do apologetics for the Quran, and they're like, we highly respect it. We love Jesus Christ like that. We're not saying that. It's like, and then it gets into like his divinity and stuff. But they they talk very highly of him because I think he's talked highly about in the book as well.
Yeah, he definitely is. There's passages in the Quran where it talks about Jesus as a baby looking up at Mary and being like, I am a prophet of the holy God. As a baby, like looking up and speaking to him. And there's also subsequent texts of that in books that are quote unquote left out of the Bible from the Nag Hammadi. Mm-hmm. There's a book called The Gospel of the Infancy of Jesus, where he says the same thing, where he looks up and instead of saying I am a prophet of God, he says I am the son of God.
Got you.
Right.
Okay, right.
I think if a baby talks to you ever,
something's going on.
He's definitely more than just a prophet, son. That's just what I think. Yep. And they also have a verse in there about Jesus dyeing cloths. Like there's like cloths, and Jesus would dip them into water and they would come out dyed. Like on different colors and stuff. Same type of passages in the infancy gospel of Jesus. So they definitely hold him very highly, but I definitely thought that they had more leniency. But that's interesting to know that they.
Well, I would assume they'd have a little more leniency in terms of the final prophet versus one of like your important prophets. But I do think that they kind of hold him close, but they also may talk a lot of shit on the white, blue-eyed Jesus.
Yeah, well, I think at this point, most people, if you truly understand what was going on, they'll talk a little bit of schmack about that white, brown-haired, blue-eyed Jesus.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I definitely agree with that. And then you have Judaism, which just completely ignore Jesus for who he is. Right? Like they don't understand Jesus to be the Son of God at all.
So who's this Jesus guy?
He was a person who's probably born, from my understanding, between like 4 or 5 BCE and about 3 AD. So you're looking at just the turn of like, I don't know if it's the millennium or just that it's the turn of BC to AD.
Right.
Born in Bethlehem.
And his being born is what transitioned that time.
That is what's said, but like if you think about it, like there are some people who say that he was born in 4 or 5 BCE, or even like earlier than that, because in texts in Matthew it says that King Herod was still alive and ordered for every infant under the age of 2 to be murdered. Well, King Herod was historically died in 4 BCE. So if you're looking at those and you're saying that this has to be true, then Herod would have to still be alive when Jesus is. So there is a possibility that he was born before then.
Oh shit, okay.
Right?
That's cool. Yeah.
And people changed it from BC, which was before Christ, to BCE, which is before the coming era.
Okay.
So that's kind of the politically correct term to put that in.
Right.
And Jesus came. He was a guy who was born in Bethlehem and essentially went around the time he was 30 years old. Before that, he probably studied in a school which is called Fehr, which was among young boys in Jerusalem.
Okay. Is this a Christian belief or is this like a...
No, this is like a universal belief. So this is a universal belief. So it's not necessarily that he did this, but many young boys around that time, like Judaism was the main religion, and they had schools for you to go to as a young kid.
Right.
Between the ages of like 6 to 9, there was a school called Fehr, which is like the school of the book. And there, young boys go and they learn the Torah. Like they go and learn the oral version of the Torah, and they learn it from the masters. And I don't think they really like dive too far into deep in like theology and what it means, but they just go into memorizing the text because that was how stories got passed down in the olden days. And after Bet Sefer, around the time that they're 10, if they're like gifted and they're able to move on, then they're invited to go to this thing called Bet Talmud, which is like the school of wisdom, which it kind of goes into like a little bit of the theology of the Torah.
Okay.
Right? Like of the Old Testament and stuff. And then there's another, and that's between about 11 to 13. There's another school after that. I forget what it's called. That goes until you're about 16. And then if you're really, really, really good, and like a great, person who understands the law and the teachings and you have everything like memorized, then a rabbi may invite you into his discipleship.
Oh, okay.
And he'll invite you to follow him. Like that's what the rabbis used to do. Pharisees, Sadducees, things like this, right?
And so historically, if Christ, just in terms of being just an actual historic human being, if he was growing up in this culture, he probably was involved in some of this at some point.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
At minimum, probably Bet Sefer.
Okay.
The first one, right?
The 6 to 9.
Yeah, 6 to 9.
Okay.
And then after that, I mean, if you don't get selected, you probably just go and you just learn your parents' trade. Right.
He was a carpenter.
He was a carpenter.
Okay.
His dad, his father Joseph, was a carpenter. So that's probably what he was doing.
Right.
Yeah. Around his 30s, he starts doing. He starts a ministry, a following of himself. He calls these people who weren't exactly the most highly regarded, like rabbis, traditional rabbis. They will choose selected people, 15, 16, 17-year-old boys who have gone through the process of learning what the books mean and understanding the wisdom of them, where Jesus started walking around and just saying to dudes who were on boats, just fishing, follow me and I will make you fishers of men, right? Mm-hmm. And even like the people who he was calling, the first person he ever calls, it's kind of debated, but it's definitely Andrew and Peter. Mm-hmm. Andrew in the book of John is the first person he calls. In Matthew and Luke, he calls them together. Actually, in Luke, I don't think he necessarily calls them, but in Matthew, for sure, he calls them together. And Peter is who Jesus, quote unquote, sets the foundation of his church on, which is where the Catholic Church understands that Peter is the rock of the church and the foundation of the Catholic Church.
Gotcha.
The Catholic Church believes that Peter is their first pope as well.
Right.
Peter is defined in the Hebrew word amharetz, which actually means the unlearned. The unlearned. It's pretty widely regarded that Peter didn't even know how to read. Like in a lot of the books, like in the Greek version of Acts, I want to say, they also describe him as idiotus, which is where we get the term idiot.
Right. Okay.
Like he was unlearned. He really didn't know how to read. He probably didn't know too much about the law. He wasn't necessarily from this Jewish background. Like, it was known that Peter really didn't keep the Sabbath, right? Like that was a big thing back then, was keeping the holy day holy. And there were many like instances of Peter, like going and working on the Sabbath or doing this on the Sabbath, like showing that he was not of the same school.
Yeah. Yep.
So Jesus starts like forming all these guys and starts like walking around, and his ministry seems very different than everybody else's. Traditionally in Judaism, you had strictly males following around.
Right.
Jesus's ministry was much more intermingled, men and women.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Throughout the text, you'll also see that there are 3 women who follow him. Mary, his mother, Mary of Magdalene, who's debated to be Jesus's partner or not, lover. And another lady, sometimes she's called Mary, and I think sometimes she's called Salome. And they are, in my opinion, kind of supposed to also represent the Trinity.
Oh,
and that's why they're brought up in the Bible, is you have like the mother who's the father. You have Mary Magdalene, which could represent the son. And then you have the other lady representing the spirit.
Yes. Right. Okay.
So kind of does his ministry, and he's saying all sorts of crazy stuff. He's kind of talking like revitalizing old language, these old laws, kind of giving them a new spin, saying it's not just about the letter of the law, it's about what the law represents. You've heard it said, do not murder, but Jesus said, he says that I say to you, any person who is angry and has hearted his brother has already murdered him. Kind of like expanding what the law might mean.
Right. Going a little deeper with it.
And a bunch of people don't like this. Over about 3 years, they say that he's blaspheming, saying that he's the Son of God, and they crucify him. Beat him up real bad. Whip him. Cat o' nine tails.
Put a reed in his hand.
Put a reed in his hand. Give him a crown of thorns. Make him carry this big-ass cross up a mountain.
And that was a common execution in those days.
Really common. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so this guy just seems like he is a very controversial figure. He makes people, just like you said before, and this is like, I think most people could agree with this regardless of anything, is that you walk into a room and you yell, I love Jesus Christ, or I hate Jesus Christ. That's going to split the room in half.
Yeah.
Or you just say his name. That's going to split the room in half on how people feel instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like, and maybe it's just the culture that we're in. You go to another culture and you say that. No one cares. But you say they're the person that they think is their savior or their God, and that might split the room. You know what I'm saying? But Christ is everywhere, I guess. He's in Africa and China and South America. So, like, why is that? Why do you think that I can say something about Buddha and people would be like, oh, that's cool, or like, but like you say something about Christ, it feels like it's got a lot more behind it, a lot more emotion behind it, regardless if it's with or against.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's everywhere. It's not just in one place or another place. It's like pretty typically, if you say, Jesus Christos, if you say Jesus, if you say, whatever the language is there to represent Jesus, people are going to feel some sort of way about it. Tell me what you think about this. I kind of feel like you can put a lot of religions into two type of cultures. I think you have the culture of absolute truth and you have the culture of relativism. Right? So like relativism, you can probably play around more with like Hindu, Buddhist, Taoism, where everything is more relative. Nothing is really good or bad. I don't know about I'm kind of speaking out of pocket right now because I don't know too much about these religions. But I don't really know what their like belief on like how the world came into being is. But I really doubt that it's through some sort of like God saying, I'm going to create this, I'm going to create that, I'm going to create this. And I'm not sure, but
well, from what I understand, and again, this could be wrong as well, is that the universe created itself. And so the Big Bang is just something from something before that is just as natural as an apple falling from a tree. And it's just infinitely creating and destroying through eternal time, pretty much, I think. And that's where the reincarnation can happen, because time is relative. Time is it's not what you think it is in terms of, well, in 1,000 years, this is going to happen. It's relative to everything. So,
right.
And that, I would argue, though, you get into morality and relativism, that is where that has given me a lot of faith in a God actually existing. Is like, I don't think that at the end of the day, there's no truth. I think there is truth that's outside of you and me.
Yeah.
I don't think that because I do agree that some things are relative. They have to be.
Yeah.
Not everyone can do all the same thing at all the same time. So it's a tight line to walk, but I also do believe that when you leave it up to relativism, then you leave it up to Andrew Tate. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it's relative, then Andrew Tate's right.
Right.
Or at least he's not wrong. He's not necessarily right, but he's not wrong.
He's living his truth.
He's living his truth.
His truth,
and it's
man.
relative to him, and so it's all good. That's where it's kind of like, some things he says I feel like are wrong.
Absolutely.
Not relatively wrong, but like, he probably shouldn't do that to any girl ever. But I would have to have something that I bank my beliefs on and bank that definition on to be able to say that. Because if I just say that, then who cares? Because that's just my opinion.
Right.
So, and again, it just comes down to being my opinion, but at least I have something that I am relying on to define these things for me, rather than, because you have to do that. That's where the almost objective can come through, is that you're at least trying to rely on something to define it, rather than, because that's the thing, is like, I could define you as my friend and then tomorrow not define you as my friend and then treat you as such, and it doesn't matter because it's all relative. And
or friend could mean something different to you than it does to me, so you can treat me however you want
right,
to.
like, what if a friend is a money opportunity? What if that's how I define a friend?
Mm-hmm.
And that's relative, and so I'm justified to lie and cheat anyway because my definition is my definition. So who cares? That's where, again, you get into the Holocaust. You get into like the very extreme situations. If it's relative, then it's relative. There's a guy. His name's Matt Dillahunty, and he is one of the best, if not the best, atheist on the internet that I can find talking about and defending atheism. Pretty much, he's like an atheist apologetic almost. But in the term of like atheist means like lacking belief, so you can't like be an apologetic for something you don't like. You have a lack of belief in, like
Right.
But this was his, and I want to see what you think of this. This is where he gave me a definition of morality and secularism. And he says, I get morality from my understanding of reality, not an assertion of authority. And he used to be a Christian. So he's saying, you have two kids and two families, and they go into a restaurant, and one family, the parents told the kid, if you scream, we're going to smack you. So don't scream. Mm-hmm. And then the other parents told their kid, hey, like if you scream, there's people around who, you know, like this family has a baby, and if you scream, that might really upset the baby. So you need to be aware of other people and have empathy for other people so you behave. So even though both kids are behaving a certain way, there's a different reason why they're behaving it. And he's saying that the Bible is something that's you're going to get smacked if you do this, right?
Right.
But he's saying he gets his morality from his understanding of reality. And so and so it's the exact opposite of what I just said. He's not claiming to any authority. He's just coming up with it. And again, that's great when you're a 45-year-old who's worth about $1 million and you have no sense of like power in terms of political power to change the world. But who's to say that why couldn't Trump say that? Mm-hmm. Come on, guys! I just get my morality from my morality from the understanding of reality. Why can't it's just Trump?
Well, and Trump's reality is different than yours.
Exactly.
I mean, when it comes to us all living in this world and under whatever gods may or may not be existing, his reality is not different there, but his ability to move and shake certain things is definitely there more than you. And I would agree with that, man. I think that if you're shaping your morality off of your understanding of reality and not from authority, then I just had a podcast this last week where I was talking with my buddy Drew, and Drew was talking about how I don't think he really believes in a God. And he said that that's good because it kind of eliminates all morals, and he can kind of create his own moral code, a code for certain situations.
It's very convenient. It's convenient as fuck.
And if Drew was a crazy person and wanted to murder people and was like, well, in my reality, I'm the star, and I'm the star of this horror film, and one day I'm going to get caught, and it's going to be amazing. I'm going to be locked in a cell. Then that person believes that those things are moral.
Yes.
Off of your reality. And I would also question where general morality came from in the first place. I think that's something you'd have to debate with, right?
Yes.
And to me, that would come from two places. It would either come from man or it would come from God. It would either come from a collective of people coming together and saying, well, we probably shouldn't kill people because they're people and we want them to live. We probably shouldn't steal because we wouldn't want someone stealing from us. We wouldn't want them making all of the rules, right? But at some point, you're going to have some motherfuckers who are like, well, I think it's okay to steal from this person because...
Well, what if I have to feed my family?
Exactly.
So I can steal. Everyone has a justification.
Or
to do
I
anything.
hate him.
Right.
I hate him. He doesn't believe the same thing as me.
He's less than me. He's stupid. He's an idiot. I can go do that. Right. Any justification.
Exactly. And so I think that you have to really debate with yourself of where does morality come from. Now, I'm not saying every person who is atheist is immoral. I don't think so.
Agreed.
But I do think that morality comes from something higher than us. Something that controls that spirit that I was talking about earlier that makes us have this connection.
Yes.
So yeah, man, I think that when you break down religions, you really have relative religions, and then you have quote unquote true religions. And I don't want to say that those religions are absolutely true,
but they're claiming to be.
They're claiming to be true, right? As opposed to other religions claim to be relative.
Exactly. Yep. Because Islam is another truth claiming religion that when someone who is Muslim behaves and they say, well, this is my justification and here is my definition and authority for that, then it's like, okay, well, then you're going to hold everyone in your culture to that standard. But if you just say, nah, I just came up with it, so you can come up with anything. Again, what happens when I do something you don't like? You can't do anything about it because I get to define and you get to define. But if I'm going into a culture where they say this is the authority, then I can refer to that authority to see how these people will behave. And it's just a little bit better than human beings being able to do it. Because again, you could just make the argument that humans wrote it. But then again, I don't know which book people would accept if I claimed it wasn't written by a human.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, so there's a back and forth there, but to have a body of something that you have faith and belief in that you can rely on to give you some information in some direction, I think you have to have, because if it's just you, again, if I'm a crazy person and I could say, well, shit, God, that person just kind of pissed me off today and I'm going to kill him. Well, they inconvenienced me and like, it's my reality. You know what I'm saying? Like,
You know, this guy walked by me and he kind of looked at my shoes and he didn't say anything, but like when he looked at them like, those shoes
yep.
fucking suck. And I just so happen to have a knife in my pocket, you know?
So who's stopping you?
Yeah,
Really, who's
yeah.
stopping you? Why shouldn't you? And especially if you go back to evolution, at what was the day that it's like, oh, now morals exist? It's like, well, we were animals. Go to the fucking jungle and watch what a lion will do to you. Or lions don't live in the jungle. Oh, yes, they do. They live in the... we already had that whole thing.
Shout out to Amanda Nunez.
Yeah, shout out. Go to the wild and see how an elephant will treat you, how a hippo will treat you. You know what I'm saying? They don't have any morals. They just have instinct. And so if we're coming from evolution, that's another strong argument of like, well, whatever anyone's coming up with is just arbitrary. Because if you go back far enough, there was a time with no morals. And so we just arbitrarily came up with morals one day because we're so smart. But that's the thing, is like, the reason that I don't kill somebody, if it's because it benefits me right now, that's the wrong reason to do it. Because then I could change those. If I'm defining it, I could change it tomorrow if it then benefited me.
Right.
And that's the whole problem there, is that...
And that's actually what Drew argued, was that your morals can flex depending on the situation
right.
you're in.
Yeah.
Right? Which, if that's the case, you have no morals.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
which is what he said. He said, I don't have any morals because they're flexible. Your morals are relative.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. Exactly.
And they don't come from anything. They come from you.
Yep.
They come from your ideas. And I think it's in the there's these homilies that were written, which were just books. They're letters from Peter's assistant named Clement. And they're called
homilies.
They're called homilies. They're called like the
okay.
Clementine homilies.
Okay.
And in the second book, I want to say it's the second chapter of the first book, or it's the second book. But it's talking about how if we, I mean, this is also just a biblical principle. If we come up with our own morals, if we decide where the earth comes from, it's just the blind leading the blind.
Yep.
We don't know anything. So that's why I think reaching out to God is going to be better regardless, whether he is real or not, whether God is real or not. You finding your stake and staking your claim and your beliefs in something higher than you, I feel like will always give you an edge up when it comes to morality for that reason.
Absolutely.
And that's a really, maybe a harsh way to put it, but my morality is more defined than yours would be if what I'm getting my morals from is not me.
Yes. Well, and they'll be more consistent. They'd have to be, because
You have someone to go back to.
Right. When a Christian acts out of line, that's why people have a caricature of Christians and they loathe them, because there's a standard that they claim to live to, and then they obviously do not live to that standard. And it's like, okay, why do people not like them? Because they're fucking hypocrites, because they say one thing and then do the other. But that's the whole thing, is that hypocrisy is not good, and a flex in morals is not like a good thing unless you want to do whatever the fuck you want, and then it's a great thing. It's so convenient. And so we have to be very careful of that. And that's interesting that you bring up the concept, because I heard Andrew Tate talking about that too, of like, it's better to believe in God even if you're wrong, even if it's wrong or technically wrong. But then I just look at just the world. And this is a cliche Christian argument, but order and design. And I just really fall back on, I've never seen something that was created like a book and just assumed that it had just kind of accidentally come together.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard for me to see that. So when I see nature working perfectly, when I see a human body and how perfect it works and functions and shit and how much it can take, it's just like, damn, this thing is a creation. It's not like a happenstance thing. It's like it looks like someone sat down and fucking thought this shit out because it all works together. You would have to think of everything to get it to work like this. And that is from all the way the depths of outer space or the firmament, all the way down to our hands and the germs that live on our hands. You know what I'm saying? The cohesion and the design and purpose that everything has just points to something that has created something rather than just an accident. And that also gets into evolution. I used to have a lot of faith in evolution, fell out of faith of evolution, because my understanding of how like nothing turning into something doesn't make any sense to me. So something that's inanimate turning to something that's animate does not make any sense to me. I've seen things be animate and then become non-animate. I've seen animals die, you know, like, and they're not animate anymore. They're no different than a rock in terms of experience, right?
So gross.
Yeah. But for stardust to just happenstance one day, all of a sudden start living, I don't understand that. And when you really push science to explain that, you really start to see how it's really just a theory. Because I talked to my sister who's a science teacher, and it's just like, well, like, I think it's RNA is the protein that kind of kicked everything off. And it's like, yeah. So they can give you all the information once you give over the thought of like, okay, now we have life. Well, life this, science. But it's like, well, yeah, how did we get that though? I mean, like, yeah, the RNA is a protein, and so it, but the RNA does this, it does this, and it can turn into this. Blah, 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 blah. But wait, how did it get there? Like, it always seems to kind of veer back to the process rather than like the process of how something functions rather than how something came to be, because we can't explain it. We can't explain something just becoming alive.
But on the flip side of that, if you have a totally holy, all-powerful God who exists outside of the realm of time and space,
yes,
and we can see that throughout Genesis, even in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We can see in that verse alone how he is creating matter and how he's creating the time and space continuum, which are both, I mean, scientifical, you know, people really hang their hats on that, the time and space continuum. But in the beginning, time, God created the heavens and the earth, thus linking time and space. Right? And creating everything. And so if you come from that notion, you can totally see how something does come from nothing.
Yes.
Because
something did come from nothing.
Because it's coming from God.
Right.
You know, nothing is coming from something, I guess is the way that I wanted to put that.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, and I agree. I think that when you look at, I don't know, it's hard to just be like, you're wrong because it's the Big Bang, because nobody was there and nobody knows. But it is a scientific fact that something can't come from nothing. So the Big Bang is kind of crazy. Also, when you look at the universe, which may or may not exist,
wink, wink,
we see something that is being observed that scientists believe is being pushed farther. It's expanding farther and faster every single day.
Yes.
So the universe is getting bigger every single day, and it's speeding up in the process of getting bigger. And then when you think about the concept that they have called inertia, where nothing can move unless it's being acted upon by an outside force, you think, well, how are all these things being created?
Right.
Unless you have a God who lives outside of the time and space continuum.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
Now, I want to go back to your question about why is Jesus, why universally, if you bring up the name of Jesus, his name is like what will divide more rooms than anyone else. So you have those two sets of religions, right? Relativism and truth.
Yes.
So you have the relativism, which says, you know, do this, do that. Doesn't really matter. Kind of up to you. And then you have the religions of truth, which originally, if you're talking about Judaism and Islam, were based off of rules,
Right.
and laws,
Right.
because God couldn't be around sin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was the thing. And in order for God to forgive you for your sins, you needed to sacrifice animals. There had to be bloodshed for the original sin and the sin that exists within us. For Jesus then to come and say, I am the Lamb of God,
Mm-hmm.
and through my blood you will be forgiven, I think really scared a lot of people. And when people are scared of something,
Big statement.
when people are scared of something, that makes them hate something. You are afraid
Yes.
of what you don't know.
Yes.
And what you don't understand.
Yep.
So when someone makes such a big claim like that, it's going to ruffle everybody's feathers, because they're like, well, what about all my rules? What about all of the
Yeah,
rules that
yep.
we made for all of the time and all of this?
Yep.
You know, and you can dive further into that in Matthew 5, where Jesus is in the Sermon on the Mount. We'll also talk about this, talking about so many things in this podcast.
We'll get there, baby.
We're going to get there. Where he says, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law.
Yes.
And that kind of raises questions of if we are supposed to still follow the law of sin and death, also known as the Mosaic Law,
Mhm.
or if it's Jesus's blood, and what does that kind of constitute? So I think that Jesus, although I believe that he still exists within absolute truth, Jesus is the greatest mystery in the history of the world. He truly is. We'll see this in all of the series. We'll talk about the councils. We'll talk about his divinity. We'll talk about predestination versus free will. And when you have the greatest mystery coming to the true religion and saying, this thing doesn't get you into heaven, I do, I feel like they believe he is creating a more relative religion.
A more relative.
You see what I'm saying? I don't think that he is, but I think that they are saying that either he's the truth, which they would believe is wrong,
Right.
or that what he's saying is more relative.
Relative, so that they could interpret it into, like, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is, for the longest time, the religions of truth, right?
Yes.
Islam and Judaism,
Yep.
believed that you had to follow these laws
Right.
in order to become one with God.
And now that Christ has fulfilled those laws, what do you?
The laws, some laws may not be followed as they were, and
Right.
they might have new meanings, which Jesus is giving them. And he's kind of playing around with, like, well, what does it mean to murder? Is murder, or is it more relative?
Right.
You know what you see what I'm saying? So I think that
Absolutely.
it scares them into being like, well, either A, he's saying that he is the Son of God and the truth and the way, and he's the only one that's going to get you to heaven, or he's bringing in this new way of, like, that's going to possibly, in their eyes, lead people away from God, because his truth in their eyes might be more relative.
Right. Yep.
You know?
Yep. Absolutely.
Jesus, quite honestly, in my opinion, just walked in like a gangster. You know?
Absolutely.
And just, I hope we got
Absolutely.
that. And just put 5 on him, bro. He just came in and he put 5 on him. Because Jesus came and was putting 5 on those motherfuckers. That's what I imagine Jesus's soundtrack was.
Absolutely.
Just walking
Coming
around.
in, baby.
Boom, doom, 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 doom. Come follow me. I'll make a fisherman. Doom, doom,
Yeah.
doom, doom, doom.
Well, he's controversial, and like you were saying, he's a mystery.
Yeah, he's a mystery. I think Jesus is like the greatest mystery. He's controversial. I mean, he's coming and kind of giving a reteaching of a lot of these verses and a lot of these scriptures. And I just think people get really wary about that, because if these are the verses that are going to keep us close to God, and if you want people to be close to God and you want to be close to God, someone coming in and changing that is going to really disrupt your soul.
And if it challenges your career and everything that you've ever believed, like a Pharisee, you know what I'm saying? Like, when you believe something and then someone comes and, like, oh, I could fucking kill him because he's literally doing exactly what we aren't supposed to do. And you got to be careful when you are thinking that strongly and behaving like that, because we're not the ones that get to dictate anything. God will do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need to hold someone down and say, don't do this. Like, they'll figure it out. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, there's a better way to do it. There's a better way to go about it.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because, funny enough, they really did kill him. Yeah, like they really did that.
They tried now. They tried.
Yeah,
I mean, I
so-
guess they actually literally did.
They did kill him.
Because he had to come back for it to be special.
And that's the thing,
Yep.
right? Like, if you know anything about Jesus, you definitely know. If you don't know anything about his life, anything that we've kind of said in a brief synopsis of the episode, you definitely know that he is believed to have been killed, crucified, and then risen again.
Mm-hmm.
And that. Other than Jesus being the biggest mystery, to me is the biggest question. Is what do you think about the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ?
Yes. Yes.
Because if you're in the relative religions, you're just kind of playing ball with yourself. You're
Yep.
not really playing the ball with, I guess, the true religions. You're playing different games, football and baseball.
Yep.
But if you're in the true religions, it comes down to what do you think about Jesus?
Yes, it does. Because that's the ultimate thing. Because it will dictate everything that you believe. And you can go one way or the other. But like, to wrap kind of this whole thing full circle, is that you can't get away from Jesus if you live in America. You will, like you said, you'll hear about him. You will run into people who hate him and talk about how much they don't like him and how much they disagree. You'll find people who agree with him and love him and can't shut up about him. So the thing comes down to not is just be ignorant of him. It's going to be what do you think of him, because you can't get away. And I say the United States, but again, it's worldwide, all throughout Africa, all throughout Asia. You know what I'm saying? Like South America, Mexico, Canada. I'm sure there's Christians in Canada.
Oh yeah, tons.
I don't
Well,
know
and
who's
the
up there.
big reason for that is because, you know, when the Roman Empire was the center of the world and ruling the world, you know, early on in Christianity, where you're talking first century, second century, third century, so up until about, you know, the 300s, Christians were heavily persecuted. They were killed and martyred for the sake of Jesus, and they would be asked, you know, denounce the name of God or denounce that Jesus is Lord, and
Right.
or we're going to kill you. And they were doing terrible things to these people, boiling them alive, crucifying them upside down on an X-shaped cross,
Oh
like
my God.
all like stoning them to death, like just terrible things. And I mean, I'm sure that there are maybe some people who were like, yeah, Jesus isn't anything, but the vast majority of them died for their
Right.
beliefs. And that's really where Constantine in 313 legalizes Christianity, and then in 325 calls the Council of Nicaea, and then it isn't until at 325 it becomes the preferred religion of Rome, and then in 380 it becomes the official religion.
Right. Yep.
And so because of them spreading, you know, Jesus, that's really where I think we get the fact that Jesus is known worldwide.
right. Yep.
Check this out, bro. And maybe we can end here.
Okay.
I told Drew this one time, and he said that my idea was too American westernized. But I think that there are, in all of human history, maybe 20 icons. Maybe. People who, like, if you say their name to anybody throughout history,
Right.
you know, you're going to get a reaction, or they're at least going to know who they are.
Right.
Right. And like outside of Jesus, I definitely believe Jesus is an icon. I mean, you could talk about people like Gandhi,
Yep. Yep.
the Dalai Lama.
Yep.
I think Mother Teresa is pretty big.
Very.
And like people like that, right? Just very influential people. The Prophet Muhammad,
Yep. Buddha.
Yep. But Jesus is the biggest icon.
Yeah.
Unless you're an uncontacted tribe in Africa, odds are you're gonna have heard about Jesus.
Yep. Because he's the heaviest hitter in his claims. Buddha is not as controversial. Muhammad's probably fairly controversial in the true statements. Because to be controversial is you have to say something that you think is true and that you don't care if someone disagrees with that. And because that's where the controversy comes, is that people are like, oh, I can't believe you'd say that. But like, if it's true, then, you know. Yeah, I like that. And I have one question for you regarding this to wrap this up for just the introduction of the Bible and everything, is that I've always thought, and I still think, that the winners write history.
Agreed.
So it's interesting to me that this book, the losers wrote the history. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I could see that. I
It
could see what
feels
you're
like
saying there.
After the thing that everyone claimed to have happened, they were all killed. Everyone was being killed for it. And that doesn't seem like a winner to me, to have your leader killed in front of everybody. And then if you're not one of the, 500 people, then it's just going to be a leap of faith off of someone's eye testimony. And then everyone gets killed. So, like, they don't seem like the winners, but the fact that we're still talking about a losing story, like a losing human, the worldly, they lost in the world. You know what I'm saying? But
I mean, they're being heavily persecuted.
Right, exactly. And so, yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think that I mean, in the relation of time, it's only a couple of hundred of years, right? If you think that Jesus died somewhere around 30 AD, and then at 313, so you're looking at about 300 years, right, of them being, I mean, even before that, I mean, Jesus died, and so around the persecution started mid-first century. Even if something isn't winning at the time, I think, and this could be some God thing, but if people are literally dying for what they believe, it's going to be very interesting to people. They're going to go, why? Why? You know? And then they can come and they can learn. Yep. I think there's also inherently something that humans love to not do what the government says.
Yes.
Granted, when you're like, I mean, murder and dying back then was probably a lot more common. Like, you're probably much more aware of the fact that you can get murdered every single day.
Yep.
But there could be something to humans like to disobey the government. And the government is saying this and this, so they're like, well, I should look into that because the government doesn't want me to, and da-da-da-da. But I would say that it's actually a winning story in the end.
But do humans tend to not listen to the government, or do they tend to listen to the government?
I think it depends on with certain things.
I just feel like through the mass history, all of the atrocities that's been able to happen is because people followed. Because there's always this select few that'll say "fuck you," but like, you know, Russia, the Soviet Union. Yeah,
but think about how many people smoke weed in Idaho.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Like there's people who will be, you know, overall, I don't know. There's people who will be like, you know, I'll follow the government overall, but then they'll still have certain things where they're like, yeah, the government,
right.
I don't care about that.
Yep.
You know, and because murder and dying was probably so much more prevalent back then, choosing your religion based off of that, they probably would have been like, do you see where I'm going with this?
They're a little more desensitized to death, so they were more willing to die. I mean,
or just to say, not even just to die, but like just to say, well, I don't believe that, I believe this. Right. Because it's kind of moot. Because you're just talking about your beliefs at this point. Like you believe, in a modern sense, you believe that cannabis is bad for you, and I believe that it's not that bad or that it's good.
Right.
And so we have just differing beliefs. So because I believe something different, I'm not scared to like go against the government and say that.
Right.
And if death is much more prevalent in your life back then, you'll probably be more willing to like join it. But I do agree with you where it's like how big the church got in those years, with it being straight up illegal for you to be died, for you to die because of your beliefs, is still pretty astonishing.
Yeah.
And in the end, because, and this is a theory, not Christians hold this, but secular people hold this. Constantine saw that. He saw that these people were just like willing to die for God. And they believe that he kind of saw that and thought that Christianity was the best way to control people. And thus he put together the councils and kind of started to put that into motion.
Right.
But I think that with it being the national official government in 380, it ends up being a winning story. But those first 300 years are, I think, the most important to the development of Christianity.
Right. Absolutely. Yep.
Because that's what had to survive in order to get to 380.
Right. Yep. Okay, man. First one in the books.
First one,
Woo!
Man. Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it.
We're going to dive into all that we were just talking about. You know, we're kind of setting the premise for the council and shit like that. So
keep on watching, listening, however you're consuming this. We really appreciate it. Cougar and I honestly are going to record the next how many ever episodes
we're going right after this
now,
one, baby.
So if we are wearing the same clothes in a lot of these episodes, you'll know why. I literally brought a change of clothes to look different in some
Hell yeah.
episodes.
Hell yeah.
But you know what? We're putting this together, and Cougar, I love you.
I love you too, bro.
And
this is fun.
I'm so glad that God has placed us together and had us form this union and this podcast so that we could do this.
Absolutely.
And bring some sort of knowledge, some sort of wisdom that we may have learned and gained to spread to the people.
Just let people know. Because, again, we're not going to force anyone to do anything. We're just going to talk about some things. What do we think? What do we believe? What's something saying? And, we don't make any fucking money, so we can say whatever the fuck we want. Let's go.
I got 5 on it.
All right. I love you all. Tune in for the next one because we're just going to jump straight into it, but you can listen whenever.